My friends at Easy Cater are workplace catering pros, helping you find food for everything from daily employee meals to staff meetings and special events. Visit easycater.com/leaderassistant to find out more.
I'm Dayne Shuda. This is today's leadership quote. You are what you do every day. If you want to change your life, you have to change what you do each day.
The Leader Assistant podcast exists to encourage and challenge assistants to become confident, game-changing leader assistants.
Hey friends, thanks for tuning in to episode 104. You can check out the show notes at leaderassistant.com/104. I'm excited for today's conversation because written communication is such a big part of our jobs as executive assistants and administrative business partners. If you have not taken some time to improve your writing skills, whether that's writing emails, newsletters, writing blog posts, drafting and editing blog posts on behalf of your executive and your team, I highly encourage you to spend some time on written communication, professional development, and I hope this episode helps you. Dayne has a lot of writers on his team and has done a lot of writing himself and has some great tips on written communication and how to be a better writer. So I know this will help you out as well. So I hope you enjoy it. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into the Leader Assistant Podcast. It's your host, Jeremy Burrows. Today I'm speaking with Dayne Shuda, who's owner of Ghost Blog Writers. Dayne, how's it going?
It's going good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, what part of the world are you in?
So I'm in Wisconsin, closest big city. I'm in western Wisconsin. We're about an hour or so from Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Okay, awesome. So let's kind of jump off and start talking about you a little bit. What's maybe one of the first jobs that you had growing up, and what did you learn in that role that you still use today?
One of my first jobs was I worked in a golf club pro shop, kind of as a do anything person. I started they had a bag room where the golfers could leave their clubs overnight, and I kind of would get the clubs ready, put them away, get them washed and cleaned, and then moved into the pro shop where I kind of worked as an assistant to the golf pro, who was kind of in charge of managing the goings-on with the course and the pro shop. And so I just kind of learned a little bit about that, how to manage dealing with people. So that was one of the first jobs. I had a couple odds and end jobs before that, but that was one kind of a taste of what real life business management might be like.
Awesome. So Dayne, tell us a little bit about your career progression from then to today.
Yeah. So that first job I had, that was kind of the last few years of high school, and then went to college here in Wisconsin. Knew I kind of wanted to go to school for business, so I think I just went for like a business management degree and graduated. Applied for a few different jobs, got one for a footwear catalog company here in Wisconsin, and kind of got to learn about the direct mail industry, catalogs. And then at that time it was 2007, 2008, and they had been involved in online websites and online marketing and stuff like that. But I started learning about it and kind of got into blogging as a hobby. And then the company Ghost Blog Writers kind of grew out of that, started as freelance writing, and kind of grew into a small agency from that.
Nice. So do you have an assistant right now?
I do. I've had an assistant. I guess she's been an assistant. She does a lot of different things, but I call her, she's kind of an account manager or a general manager. But she's been with me since 2015, so it's going on 5+ plus years this year.
Awesome. So she's remote, right? You guys both work remote?
Yeah, so I'm in Wisconsin and she's in Australia.
Wow.
We're almost exactly, it kind of depends on daylight savings, but we're almost exactly 12 hours difference. So we've only spoken on the phone a couple times. We've emailed a lot, and usually our emails are separated by a day. So yeah, we've kind of been running the company together on completely different time schedules.
That's awesome. So what's kind of some lessons learned from trying to work remotely like that?
Yeah, I guess one thing that we've learned is that, at least in our area, nothing is extremely urgent, or it may seem urgent. There certainly were times, and still are, where I felt something is urgent, but obviously Lindy has been sleeping, and you kind of have to wait at least 12 hours to get a response. And I think her as well. Over the years, we've kind of learned that, sometimes it might feel urgent in the moment, but most things aren't, at least in my experience. And so that's kind of been a big lesson. And it's been nice too. You send an email and you don't necessarily expect an immediate response. And after a while, that seems to become a good habit, where I think today we get used to, we almost can drive ourselves crazy if we don't get a text message or an email back within whatever the expectation might be.
So what would you say to an executive or a business owner who's looking at hiring an assistant, but they're really struggling with the idea of having a remote assistant, and they think, well, it's just going to be too hard to communicate, or not going to be able to get what I want done? What would you say to an executive wrestling with that decision?
Yeah, I would say, in my experience from the executive side, is just trust. And you're giving up tasks, you're giving up access to things. And I would say it's probably not as big of a concern as one would think at first. And then from the assistant side would be, especially early on, trying to show that you can be trusted and organized. And I know early on with Lindy, she was very organized, very good with communication. And it was a very short time period before I was pretty much ready to hand everything over to her. And so the relationship got off to a good start. And the remote thing, that was also interesting, because a lot of people that I would tell would kind of give me a very confused look, and they would ask things like, you mean you haven't spoken to her on the phone more than one time, and you're running this business together? So you get a lot of, it's not normal, but I think it's becoming more normal, and people are kind of starting to see that it certainly is possible, and most people are trustworthy. And so yeah, that was kind of a interesting pushback early on. Not that it affected much, but it was just that it was kind of unusual at the time.
So what's something that your assistant does that maybe technology or artificial intelligence will never be able to do?
She definitely adds a great human element to working with clients. And then, so we also have a team of about 50 remote writers. And so with clients and writers, the main form of communication is email. And Lindy does a great job of writing emails in a very personal way that maybe put a client at ease or make a writer feel appreciated. One thing we've noticed over the years is being a writer or a blogger, you can do an article perfectly well. You could do 5 articles perfectly well, and you'll get, most of the feedback you get is negative. And just over time, that kind of builds up, and you start to question your ability. And I think Lindy has always made it a priority to give positive feedback and tell personal stories and share not real personal information, but just like little anecdotes that kind of make the communication with everybody, I think, just make it feel like you're working with a person and not a machine or a brand name.
So let's talk a little bit about burnout. Have you experienced burnout in your career?
I would say there were definite signs of it when I first brought Lindy on, and that was kind of the push. I could see that it was interesting because I'm 35 now, so I was about 30 then, and in your 20s, at least it seems like you have a lot of energy to go around, but I was still kind of reaching what I could tell was maybe the limits of my abilities, and so I knew I needed to bring someone on. And then a couple years ago, my wife and I had a daughter, and that was kind of another little push to give Lindy and a few others more responsibility, where you only have so many hours or so much energy to give certain tasks. So those were definitely two times when the burnout, I think, just came from doing too many things, whether it was work and personal life combined.
So have you done anything kind of with your weekly or monthly rhythms or yearly rhythms to prevent or, fight back against burnout?
Yeah, I definitely do. Something I do at least once a year, and I think mostly twice a year is I'll look at my schedule, and first I'll kind of look at kind of a running priority list I have of ideas I have for the business, and I'll kind of prioritize it. And each year I'll try to keep it to just one or two main efforts, new efforts for the year, new points of emphasis. And what I'll do then is kind of go into my weekly schedule, which is pretty consistent each week, or you could do it by month. And then I just try to structure each day to kind of focus on that annual emphasis. And what I find is that it's easy for new things to kind of creep in. And I try to schedule each day with, say you have 8 hours to work, I try to schedule about 5 or 6 hours of work into the day. And most days you can get those things done, you feel good, and then you still need those extra hours for miscellaneous things that come up that you don't necessarily know what they might be, but something always seems to come up. And best case scenario, nothing comes up and you have a couple extra hours to work on some extra projects or get ahead. So it's I do definitely try to schedule my week where it might seem underscheduled, but to me it's actually just right. And for the little surprises that come up, there's time built in, almost like a contingency. And that I've definitely seen has kind of helped me avoid burnout and just trying to fill it up to the max.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's definitely good to have margin, like plan the margin and plan for extra time, because there's going to be something that always comes up.
Yep, you can kind of know what it might be, but it seems to always change and always something new, and you can prepare for something happening, but not necessarily exactly what will happen.
Yeah. So how can assistants anticipate their executives' needs, and maybe specifically, how does Lindy anticipate your needs, being on the other side of the world?
Yeah, so she's been really good at staying in tune with what she's asked, like what my goals are for the year or what I'm thinking about, or she definitely seems to pay attention to my email communication to her. And from that, she'll come up with ideas for ways to make a process more efficient, or something to change, or just recently there was a task that So one of the tasks for our company is creating titles for the blogs, and the writers don't always do that. We have someone who kind of does that separately, and it kind of makes it more efficient. But Lindy had a suggestion to have someone new do that and kind of make the whole thing more efficient. And it wasn't necessarily something I was thinking about. It's easy for anyone to kind of get caught up in what you're doing on any given day and not think kind of at the bigger picture. But Lindy kind of saw what was going on and tried to solve that problem. And it's certainly something that I do too. And I'm sure most executives do, but I also have worked with assistants like Lindy who have been very good at kind of looking at the big picture and trying to give suggestions. And not that they would always be implemented, but it's definitely been a big help to have her also thinking about the business as a whole. And so she kind of watches what's going on, listens to me, and then kind of helps in that way.
That's great. So let's talk about writing and communication, written communication specifically. So you help people with blog posts and kind of content creation, right?
Yep. Yeah. So any type of business that has a blog but usually doesn't have the internal resource to do it themselves, or they just don't like writing. That's kind of what our service is for.
Okay. So writing is kind of a huge part of our lives, whether it's a LinkedIn post, a blog post, a book, or something as simple as a quick email to the board at your company. So what would you say to assistants who maybe they're thinking, I'm not a writer, I'm never going to do a blog, or never going to write a book, but I know that they have to write email after email and Slack message and even sometimes, communication from their executive to their whole company about, a crisis or an emergency or something. What would you encourage them with, and maybe even just share a couple of practical tips on writing better?
Yeah, so in general, we speak in longer sentences than we read. At least that's how it seems to me. So especially with blog posts, and then we've kind of applied it to the email we send each other. It's kind of cliche, but it's shorter sentences in general when you're writing, and shorter paragraphs just allows people to kind of scan things, read things quicker, and then go back and find information. It's for whatever reason, it's difficult to read a big paragraph of text, whether it's a blog post, email, text message. It just kind of turns people off, and especially if you're asking someone to do something, and it can be tricky to ask multiple things in one email or give direction on multiple things in one email. So it's good to, for sure, break it up into different sections or paragraphs, maybe even include headings in emails. We do that sometimes where the email might have 3 things that we want a writer to do, and instead of just putting it in one paragraph, we'll break it up into 3 short sections with headings and maybe even number them. Seems like we all like numbered things. A lot of blog posts have numbered sections, and we found that emails are kind of the same way. If you kind of break it up, you can reference them later or say, in point 1, here was the direction. So that's a couple things that you might not think of for email or even text message, but it definitely seems to help with comprehension and just making the communication better.
What about just practicing, and what are your tips on a good place to start if someone wants to improve their writing?
Yeah, so I think a blog definitely helps, and a blog can really be anything. If it's a personal blog, it could be a lot of people use a blog as a journal. You could also write a journal that you just keep for yourself, where you write about whatever is going on with you. I kind of used my first blog as a way to document what I was doing at work, what I was learning, what I was reading. And I did that for over a year before I started blogging as a freelancer. And I definitely noticed that after just not really knowing what I was doing, how to write, I was definitely picking up on little nuances of writing, and like the paragraph thing, the shorter sentences, the way to structure it, certain words to use when it doesn't make sense to use a longer word or something like that. So you could start a blog or a journal type just as a way to write every day in a kind of a focused way. Obviously we all write a lot of emails or text messages, and we get pretty good at those the more we do it. But something like a blog or a journal might provide a little bit more structure. Or if you want to get into something more like article writing, then I think the only way to do that would be to write an article every day, even just for your own practice. I wasn't a songwriter or anything, but I've always been intrigued by how songwriters write songs, and they kind of schedule time all week long, and they go to these writing sessions, and it's really just a quantity game. They try to write hundreds of songs every year to maybe get 5 that are recorded and 1 that's a hit. And so it's really just about quantity. Whatever you want to do to be a better writer, you just kind of have to do it every day and plan on doing that for a while.
Yeah, it's repetition and
Yep.
consistency.
Yep.
What about any tools? Like, do you recommend Grammarly, or is there any other tools that you recommend for checking spelling and grammar and improving our, English 101?
Yeah, the Grammarly is a good one, and the Yoast SEO plugin is good for certain things. They have some good suggestions. One thing I've noticed is with blogging, and I think it's probably true in email and other forms of communication, is people, not all people, but I think a lot of us tend to try to write at almost like a college plus level. Just, I don't know if it's to prove how smart we are. I don't think it's everybody, but some of us, and that can usually just lead to more complexity and confusion than is necessary. So a tool like Grammarly or Yoast kind of help you tone that down a little bit. And there's a lot of, pretty much anywhere you write or type these days is going to have a spell check that'll kind of keep you in check as far as the little things like the yours or the theirs, where you might, it's usually not a big deal if you misspell something like that, but it does seem to throw people out of the flow when they're reading an email and they notice a little typo. So you'll notice, so some of those tools will usually help. So yeah, Grammarly is good. I think they have plugins for emails and things like that. And so yeah, that's definitely a tool that's positive.
Nice. How about those that do have blogs or newsletters? Do you have any tips for kind of producing or writing helpful content on a regular basis?
Yeah, the biggest way that we look at it is trying to identify questions that people are asking and then doing your best to answer it. And that's kind of our leading focus, at least with business blogging. But the number one tip I always have for blogging in general is to separate the idea brainstorming from the writing. So with every client, we go through the brainstorming process and we'll come up with a couple months worth of titles, put that on content calendar schedule, and then whoever the writer is has that schedule to work off of, and they can just see what the idea is, see in notes, and then just begin. And we kind of keep those separate. And even for a personal blogger, I think writer's block most often comes from sitting down at a computer, knowing you want to write, but now you have to find something to write about and then start writing. And I think that's one of the most impossible things is trying to do that. And I think I even read this past Christmas about Charles Dickens and writing A Christmas Carol, and the story has always been that he wrote it real fast and that it was like a 6-week thing. But then there was a story that he was walking around for weeks. Every night he would go for a walk and he was thinking about all the different ideas he had, or he was trying to come up with ideas for stories. And so he was kind of brainstorming. And then finally he had one that he wanted to flesh out. And then that's when he sat down and wrote it. So, and even with where I mentioned songwriters, almost all of them carry, well, I think they use their phones now, but they would carry like a little black book and just write song titles all the time. And then when they would go to their scheduled song sessions, they would all pull out these books, list out the titles, and pick one to write. And that's much more efficient way to do it than just going to a room and saying, okay, what are we going to write about today, and try to come up with something from scratch.
Yeah, that's great. I've actually heard that tip, I think from Jeff Goins a while back, and basically the idea that you should just write, not even worry about editing, and then, come back later and have an editing session.
Yeah.
It's been very helpful as I write blogs and as I wrote my book, and just really helpful to just kind of make sure you put your writing hat on and don't try to put your editing hat on at the same time.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a great point. There's definitely different sections of writing, and if you break it up and kind of give yourself permission to work on each of them separate, it definitely, I would say, results in better finished product and keeps you from burnout and all those things.
Awesome. So is there any other writing advice that you'd like to share?
The only other one I would say is whatever the writing is I think the goal should be to write as much as possible. And I think a slight misconception is that the focus is on quality over quantity. But I think, at least in my experience, the quality comes from the quantity, especially early on. And so I don't think quantity is necessarily a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. And so if you're trying to improve at blogging, I would focus on doing it every day, or probably more often than you're thinking about. And I think that just, you learn so much by doing it every day or every week, if that seems like a lot, than you would if you just try to write only the best post possible each time.
Yeah, right. So, Dayne, thanks so much for sharing your tips on writing. Where can we find you online, and how can we support what you're up to?
Sure. The best place is to connect. The most active social that I use is LinkedIn. And so just search for Dayne Shuda. As far as I know, I'm the only one. So just reach out. You can connect with me, send me a message. Otherwise, our website is ghostblogwriters.com. If you're interested in anything there, or know anyone that's struggling with their business blog, and let them know, and we might be able to help. But yeah, LinkedIn, definitely connect with me there.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll share your links in the show notes so people can find you. And yeah, thanks for taking time out of your day, and hope you have a good one.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks again, Dayne, for a great episode on written communication and more. You can check out the show notes at leaderassistant.com/104. Have a good day and talk soon.
GoBulls.com